Lin Xiaoran sat in the corner of the underground car, with an old song that he had heard countless times in his headphones, and a bunch of unread work messages were displayed on the screen of the mobile phone. He looked down at the screen, his eyebrows as if he could snatch a bob. It was the overtime notification, and the customer urged him. His meager salary was not enough for him to lose, but he had to smile and greet him. He sighed, turned off his cell phone, raised his head and looked at himself reflected on the window glass, a tired and ordinary face, 2 dark circles under his eyes, like a bare cat. I would have liked to change my personal life. He muttered in a low voice, his voice so low that he could hardly hear it. The ground is swaying, and the people in the car are like sardine jars, and the air is filled with the smell of sweat and the smell of cheap perfume. He closed his eyes and began to think nonsense in his brain. How good would it be if he could have a different life? You don't have to squeeze the ground every day or look at the boss's face. It's best to have a little money and be a little bit better. At this moment, the underground railway suddenly shook violently, as if it was hit hard by something. The people in the car were shocked, some fell down, some screamed, and Lin Xiaoran was not standing firm, and his brain hit the handrail next to him with a bang. He rubbed the head, wrote a dirty word, looked up, and found that the scene outside the car window was a little uneven. The tunnel that was originally supposed to be a dark one, but now it has turned into a blurred light and shadow, shaking constantly like the waves on the water surface. What's this? He was stunned for a moment, rubbed his eyes, and thought he was confused. But the light and shadow became clearer and clearer, and even began to twist into a strange shape, as if something was trying to slide from the other side. He felt nervous and wondered that this matter was not simple, but he couldn't say where he came from. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly sounded in his ears. Are you ready? Lin Xiao was shocked and turned suddenly, and found that no one around was talking to him. The sound seemed to be directly diamonding into his brain, bringing an indescribable sense of distortion. His heart beats faster and he couldn't help but look around, but everyone in the car was lowering his head and no one noticed him. He swallowed and tried to touch the voice and asked, Who is talking? No one answered. But the sound came again, as if it was coming from a very far place, and it seemed to be whispering in his ear, The other you are waiting. Lin Xiaoran only felt a swelling behind her back, and her brain was in a mess. He wanted to tell himself that this was an illusion, but the sound was too real, as if someone was really standing beside him and talking. Just as he was wondering whether to get off the car, the underground swayed violently again, and the lights in the car suddenly fell into darkness. Damn, what's the situation? He couldn't help but make a sound, and he was so panicked. But the next second, a dazzling white light suddenly lit up in the darkness, shining straight on his face. He subconsciously closed his eyes, and when it opened again, he realized that he was no longer on the ground. Around it is a spacious and bright office. Outside the floor-to-ceiling window is a city night view with high-rise buildings. On the desktop is a high-end notebook computer, and a bunch of stationery that looks expensive. He looked down and saw that he was wearing a tailored suit and a flashy watch on his wrist. He was stunned. This was not his clothes or his hands at all. No, his hands were still his. But no matter how you look at it, it seemed to be longer and more powerful than usual. Where is this? He murmured, his voice full of confusion. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked at the completely unfamiliar skyline of the city outside the window, and suddenly a feeling of innocence broke out in his heart. At this moment, the phone on the desk suddenly started to rise, and the screen showed a strange name, Yi Jin. He hesitated for a moment and then picked it up. A woman's voice came from the phone, and a smile was inexplicably cold. Lin Xiaoran, congratulations, finally here. Lin Xiaoran? Who is Lin Xiaoran? He was soaked in water. He wanted to ask clearly, and the other party called directly. He looked at the screen of the phone, and the time and date displayed on it were the same, but the location turned into another city. His heart sank, believing that this matter was not simple. He began to search for the things on his desk, trying to figure out what was going on. There is a business card in the drawer with Lin Xiaoran, CEO of Xiaoran Technology. He looked at the name and suddenly a ridiculous thought flashed through his brain. It was hard to tell, Did he become another person? This thought made his heart beat faster and his hands began to tremble. He walked to a glass in the corner of the office, plucked up his courage and looked up. It was indeed him, but it was not him. The face was still his facial features, but his temperament was completely different. There was a kind of indescribable advantage and self-confidence in his eyes, like a person who had experienced countless storms. He touched his face, and the people in the mirror moved, but he just thought that this was not him. What the hell is going on? He muttered in a low voice, his brain forming a group. At this moment, the office door was suddenly pushed open, and a young woman in her career walked in with a piece of paper in her hand. She saw Lin Xiaoran, was stunned for a moment, and then she showed a meaningful smile. "President Lin, you look different today." Lin Xiaoran felt nervous and asked with a firm heart, "Who are you?" I mean, what are the arrangements today?" The woman raised her eyebrows, as if she had seen through his wrongdoing, but she didn't say much, just passed the document. "I am your assistant Xiaoli. There is an important meeting this afternoon. You can't get it about the financing of the new project." He took the document and looked down and saw that it was full of professional academic language and data, which he could not understand at all. But he still pointed his head hard and pretended that he knew very well. "Okay, I understand, you go out first." Xiaoli glanced at him, and there was a flash of confusion in his eyes, but he still turned away. After closing the door, Lin Xiao suddenly breathed out and sat on the chair. His brain was full of questions. Is this a dream or real? Why did he become this man named Lin Xiaoran? What exactly does the woman on that phone know? He tried to recall what happened on the ground before, but his memory became blurred, as if part of it had been deliberately erased by something. The more he thought about it, the more he felt, so he stopped exploring the traces in the office. He found a note in the drawer, with dense words written on it, which looked like Lin Xiaoran's diary. He flipped through the first page, which read, "If one day you see this note and say you're here, don't trust anyone, especially those who claim to know you. Remember, you're not me, but I need you to do what I haven't done." Lin Xiaoran looked at this passage and felt a slight storm behind him. This note was clearly written to him, but why did Lin Xiaoran know that he would come? What the hell is going on? He continued to flip, and the content behind became even more dissimilar, mentioning some strange words, such as stand-up law and border cracking, and a creepy warning that made him cry, "Be careful, Eugene, she is not what you think." Eugene? That's the woman who just called? Lin Xiaoran's heart sank, and he felt that he was being rolled into a marijuana. Just as he was about to continue reading, the office phone suddenly started to sound again. He hesitated for a moment and then picked it up. "Lin Xiaoran, don't waste time." The phone still had the voice of the woman, and there was a hint of impatientness in her voice. "Do you think you can escape by hiding in the office? There are some things you must face." "Who are you?" Lin Xiaoran couldn't help asking, and there was a burst of anger in his voice. "Why do I want to hear you?" The other party smiled lightly, and the sound was filled with mockery. "It doesn't matter who I am. What's important is that your current identity is not in vain. If you want to survive, do what I said. Don't miss the afternoon meeting." After saying that, the other party called again. Lin Xiaoran held the listening tube, his palms covered in sweat. He didn't know what this Eugene wanted to fuck, but her temperament made him feel that the meeting was definitely not simple. He stood up, walked to the window, looked at the strange city outside, and felt a lot of scent in his heart. He didn't know why he came here, nor did he know what Lin Xiaoran's identity meant, but he had a certain premonition all of this just began. After a few hours, he reluctantly packed up his mood, changed into a more formal suit, got on the special car arranged by his assistant, and went to the meeting location. The car passed through the high-rise building in the city. He looked at the crowd and car flow outside the window, and felt more and more uneasy. He tried to recall his life, but the memory in his brain began to become chaotic. Some clips were obviously his own experience, but they were like other people's memories. They were intertwined, making him unable to tell the truth or the false. When he arrived at the meeting place, he got off the car and saw a woman in black clothes standing at the entrance of the main building, as if waiting for him. She wore a pair of ink glasses and a smile on the corner of her mouth. Her aura was so strong that people dared not look directly on. Lin Xiaoran felt nervous and guessed that this person was Yi Jin. "Lin Xiaoran, it's time to come." She walked over, her voice exactly like the phone. "I hope you're ready, because what's going on next is not that simple." Lin Xiaoran looked at her and asked with a strong face, "What do you want to fuck? Why did you come to me?" Yi Jin smiled and did not answer directly, but turned around and walked towards the main building. "Come in, there are some answers, I will tell you at the meeting." He looked at her back, feeling confused, but his steps still followed. He didn't know what he was about to face, but he knew that from this moment on, he could no longer get back. There were already people in the conference room, and everyone looked dressed in a suit of extraordinary atmosphere. Lin Xiaoran sat in the main seat, wearing calmly on the surface, but his heart was already panicked. He had no idea what to say, nor did he know what these people were waiting for him to fuck. At this moment, Yi Jin walked to him and said in a low voice, "Don't be nervous, just follow the script." She sent him a document full of the meeting process and speech draft. Lin Xiaoran looked down and found that although these contents were professional, they were not difficult to understand. They seemed to be specially prepared for him. He felt a little nervous and thought that Yi Jin had known for a long time that he was not the real Lin Xiaoran. After the meeting began, he read the speech draft and reluctantly agreed to the past. But just when he thought everything was going well, a middle-aged man sitting opposite him suddenly stood up and said coldly, "President Lin, today's financing plan does not sound like yours. Is someone making a decision for you?" Lin Xiaoran felt nervous and wanted to explain it, but he found that Yi Jin winked at him and signaled him not to say more. He smiled hard and said, "General Wang laughed. I decided this plan. Why would there be a problem?" The other party snorted coldly and did not ask again, but his eyes were full of suspicion. Lin Xiaoran was jokingly in his heart, and he always felt that there was a greater nuisance behind this meeting. Sure enough, after the meeting ended, Yi Jin pulled him aside and said in a low voice, "You are doing well, but this is just the beginning. Some people have begun to doubt your identity. If you don't want to show off your baby, you have to adapt to Lin Xiaoran's life faster." "Applicable? I'm not him at all." Lin Xiaoran said softly, full of anger, "What do you know? Why do I want to take over his identity?" Yi Jin looked at him, with a complicated feeling in his eyes. "Some things are useless to tell you now. You just need to know that this identity is not your choice, but you must bear its consequences. Otherwise, it will be troublesome. Not only you, but your world will be." Her words made Lin Xiaoran's heart sink, and he thought that everything was far more complicated than he thought. He looked at Yi Jin's back, clenched his fists, and made up his mind. No matter what secrets there were hidden behind this identity, he had to figure them out. At this moment, his cell phone in his pocket suddenly vibrated. He took out and saw a text message from Qinyang displayed on the screen. "Still, where are you? Why didn't you reply to the message suddenly? I'm a little worried about you." Looking at this text message, a warm feeling suddenly surged in Lin Xiaoran's heart. Qinyang is his best friend in the world. No matter what happens, he is always the first to stand up and help him. He hesitated for a moment, and replied to the message, "I'm fine. I've been a little busy recently. I've been in touch with you for a few days." But when the news came out, a thought suddenly flashed in his brain. If all this is true, then where is he in this world now, and where is he in the real world? This problem made him feel panicked, and he suddenly realized that the replacement of his identity might be more dangerous than he thought. He put away his cell phone and looked up at the night view outside the conference room, feeling confused. He didn't know what he would face next, nor did he know where Lin Xiaoran's identity would lead him, but he knew that he had been rolled into a game that he could not escape. He still knew nothing about the rules of this game. Lin Xiaoran stood in the corridor outside the meeting room, and the night wind blew through the gaps in the high floor, with a biting heart. He looked down at Qinyang's text message on the phone screen, and felt like something was being pulled hard in his heart. Where's yourself in the real world now? This problem is like a bottomless pit, making him feel more and more panicked the more he thinks about it. He tried to take a few deep breaths and forced himself to calm down, but his brain was still in a group, and the fragments of memory were like pieces of pictures, and they could not be completely spelled. Yi Jin's back had disappeared at the elevator entrance, but her words still replied in his ears, "This identity is not your choice, but you must bear its consequences." This sounded like a warning, or a curse. Lin Xiaoran tightened his phone, and his palms were covered in sweat. He turned back to the meeting room, where there was no one inside, only scattered documents and a few cups of unfinished coffee. He walked to the main seat and sat down, picked up the document that Yi Jin had just handed him, and looked it through carefully. These documents are financing plans on the surface, but some strange notes are covered in them, such as words such as neighborhood agreements and soldier codes, which sounds completely different from commercial terms. He looked at his eyebrows, and the more he looked, the more he felt he was not in opposition. These things didn't seem to be what ordinary companies would involve. At this moment, the door of the conference room was suddenly pushed open, and Assistant Shaoli walked in, holding a bottle of water and a box of medicine in his hand. She saw Lin Xiao still there, was stunned for a moment, and then showed a close smile. "President Lin, why haven't you left yet? You just met and you didn't look very comfortable. Do you want to take some medicine to take a rest?" Lin Xiaoran felt nervous and put it on his face very naturally. "It's okay, it's just a little tired. I'll check out these documents again, you can go back first." Shaoli clicked his head, put the water and medicine on the table, and looked at him more before leaving, with the slightest bit of doubt in his eyes. After closing the door, Lin Xiao suddenly breathed out and leaned against the back of the chair, with his brain full of questions. Although Shaoli's attitude was normal, he always felt that there was something wrong. Everyone knew something, but he didn't tell him. He picked up the medicine box on the table and took a look and explained that it was a common head pain medicine. He hesitated for a moment, and still swallowed a piece. After all these hours, his brain felt like it was about to explode. Not long after the medicine was taken, he suddenly felt a little heavy in his eyelids and his mind began to blur. He was shocked and suddenly stood up to stay awake, but his body fell directly on the chair without hearing the stern. "Damn, there is something wrong with this medicine," he said in a low voice, but the sound was getting smaller and smaller, and the scene in front of him began to twist. Just before he was about to lose his consciousness, he heard a familiar voice, low and cold, "Don't stumble, Lin Xiaoran, this is just the beginning." When he opened his eyes again, he was no longer in the meeting room. There was a dim space around it, like a deserted warehouse, with a damp and musty smell in the air. He tried to move and found that he was being held on a chair, his feet tied tightly by rough snails. His heart beat faster and he looked around, only seeing a few tiny lights swaying far away, like ghost fire. "Where is this? Who brought me?" he shouted as he tried, but the sound was replies in the empty space, and no one responded. He became more and more panicked in his heart, and he quickly recalled what had just happened. If there is a problem with the medicine, this is certain, but who did it? Shaoli? Or Yi Jin? Or is there someone else? At this moment, the sound of the footsteps spread from a distance, slowly and heavy, as if deliberately creating pressure. Lin Xiaoran held his breath and stared at the direction where the sound came. Soon, a tall figure walked out of the darkness, wearing a long black dress and a low-pressure hat on his face, and his facial features were hard to see. He stopped in front of Lin Xiaoran, looked at him with a low head for a while, and then a low smile came out. "Lin Xiaoran, it seems that you are really capable of helping you. Who are you? Why are you rushing me?" Lin Xiaoran asked, gritted his teeth, and a shiver was shaking in his voice. He tried to tug it, but the tuck was tied too tightly and could not move at all. The other party did not answer directly, but walked around him for a few times, as if the hunter was looking at the basketball. After a while, he stopped. His language was filled with mockery. "Do you think that if you change someone, you can fool things? Lin Xiaoran, the debt you owe is not so easy to repay." "I'm not Lin Xiaoran." Lin Xiaoran couldn't help but roar, his breath filled with anger and helplessness. "I don't know what you are talking about, I was just brought here for no reason." The other party was stunned for a moment, as if he didn't expect him to say this. Then, he took off his hat and showed a scarred face, his eyes filled with coldness. It's not Lin Xiaoran? Then who are you? Don't be stupid with me, I'm not so patient. Lin Xiaoran looked at the face and felt agitation in his heart. He knew that this man was definitely not easy to mess with, but he had no way to explain his identity. Even though he couldn't figure out what was going on. He gritted his teeth and said, I'm really not him. You're looking for a wrong person. If you let me go, I won't say anything. The scarred man sneered and slammed his head. Looking for a wrong person? Impossible. The rifter in the border area will not choose anyone at will. Since you have sat in Lin Xiaoran's position, you have to bear his consequences. As he spoke, he took out a knife from his pocket and shook it in front of Lin Xiaoran. Tell me, how much do you know the secret of the substitute skills? Stand in order method? What kind of substitute method? Lin Xiao was soaked in his head, and suddenly remembered the words mentioned in Lin Xiaoran's notes. He tried to recall, but the brain was still a mess and could not make any mistakes. The scarred man looked at his expression, and his eyes flashed with a little confusion, but soon became cold again. Silly, right? Okay, I have time to play with you. He turned around and shouted into the darkness, take the things over. Soon another figure walked from afar, holding a black metal box in his hand. The scarred man opened the box and took out a strange device from it, like some kind of device, with several fine wires connected to it. He put the device in front of Lin Xiaoran and said coldly, this thing can directly read your memory. No matter whether you are Lin Xiaoran or not, you have to spit out any secrets you hide. Lin Xiaoran looked at the device and felt panicked. He didn't know if this could really read memory, but he knew that he would never let this person succeed. He gritted his teeth and turned his brain quickly, trying to find a way to take off his body. But at this moment, a rapid sound of footsteps suddenly came from another head of the warehouse, breaking the dead silence. The scarred man turned his head at the same time and showed a warning expression on his face. Lin Xiaoran took advantage of this empty file and tried to slap it hard to open the snail, but it was still useless. The sound of his footsteps became closer and closer, and then a cold sound came up, carrying a familiar mockery. It seems that I'm still in time. It's Yi Jin. Lin Xiaoran was shocked and looked up. Sure enough, she was wearing a black tight suit and walked out of the darkness, holding a small handgun in her hand, pointing directly at the scarred man. Her appearance made the atmosphere on the scene tighten in an instant. The scarred man narrowed his eyes and sneered, Yi Jin, you really don't give up. Is this substitute worth your effort? Yi Jin ignored him, just glanced at Lin Xiao, and then said, let him go, otherwise you can't leave either. The scarred man hummed, as if he didn't take her threat seriously at all. He winked at his companions, and the two approached Yi Jin at the same time, making a fuss. Lin Xiaoran felt nervous and couldn't help but shout, be careful. But Yi Jin seemed to have been ready. She flashed and easily avoided the opponent's attack. After a few clean and neat actions, she directly knocked the scar-faced man's companion to the ground. The man with Scarface changed his face and took out a knife and rushed towards her, but Yi Jin reacted faster, kicked his knee with one foot, and then pressed his gun against his head. I said, let him go. The scarred man gritted his teeth, his eyes full of unwillingness, but in the end he still raised his hands to signal his surrender. Yi Jin didn't say anything anymore, quickly walked to Lin Xiaoran's body, cut the snail with a knife, and pulled him up from the chair. Let's go, don't be rubbed. Lin Xiao's legs were still a little soft, but he still kept following her steps. The two of them quickly left the warehouse. Outside was a deserted industrial area, and the night was as bright as ink. Yi Jin took him into the black car parked on the road. After the car started, she finally relaxed and turned to look at Lin Xiaoran. You can really make trouble. You just took over the identity for a few days and were targeted. Lin Xiaoran rubbed the marks on his wrist and said unhappily, I'm having trouble? What's wrong with me? I don't know what this identity is. Do you want to say clearly what the substitute is? And what is the rifter in the border, and what is it? Yi Jin was silent for a while, and a complex emotion flashed in his eyes. After a while, she said in a low voice, the substitute method is a rule between two worlds. Everyone has the possibility of contacting themselves in the other world, or even changing their identities. But this kind of exchange is not random, but controlled by a certain force. It is not a coincidence that you can become Lin Xiaoran, but someone deliberately arranged it. Who arranged it? Why did you choose me? Lin Xiaoran asked, his voice full of anxiousness. Yi Jin shook his head and did not directly answer. It's useless to tell you about these things now. You just need to know that Lin Xiaoran has died in this world, and you must take over his position and complete what he has not done. Otherwise, not only you, but your world will be connected. Her words made Lin Xiaoran's heart sank. He suddenly remembered the warning in his notebook, "Be careful, Yi Jin, she is not what you think." He looked at her and tried to ask, "Why are you helping me? What is your purpose?" Yi Jin smiled, and there was a meaning in her smile. "My purpose? Maybe it was to save you, or maybe it was to save myself. In short, you are not qualified to ask these questions now. If you want to survive, just listen to me." Lin Xiaoran didn't say anything anymore, and he was full of doubts. He knew that Yi Jin never told the whole truth, but he had no choice but to follow her arrangements. The car flew in the night, the scenery outside the window became increasingly strange, and the uneasiness in his heart became increasingly thrilled. He didn't know what he would face next, but he just told him that this game was never over. After about half an hour, the car stopped in front of an inconspicuous apartment building. Yi Jin took him up the building and entered a room with simple decoration but many high-tech equipment hidden. She pointed to the soda, signaled him to sit down, then took out a small tablet from the drawer and started operating. "What are you fucking?" Lin Xiaoran couldn't help asking, and there was a sense of vigilance in his voice. Yi Jin didn't raise his head and said lightly, "I'm checking the status of the cleft in the border. Your time travel is not accidental. The cleft has been very unstable recently, and more people may be rolled in. If not handled properly, big problems will occur in both worlds." Lin Xiao heard a fog, but he didn't ask any more questions. He leaned against the sand, his brain was still a mess, and his memory was always flashing, some of which were his own, some of which were like Lin Xiaoran, who was in contact with each other, making him unable to tell the truth or the false. He closed his eyes and tried to clarify his thoughts, but the more he thought about it, the more he felt the pain he felt. At this moment, the tablet suddenly emitted a rapid alarm. Yi Jin's face changed and he quickly opened the screen, his eyes became unusually solemn. "No, the crack has expanded. Someone is trying to travel through time." "What does it mean?" Lin Xiaoran sat upright, his heart feeling nervous. Yi Jin did not answer directly, but quickly packed up the things. His language was filled with anxiousness. "There is no time to explain. Now we must remove the cracking position to prevent the other party. Otherwise, the balance of the two worlds will collapse at all." Lin Xiaoran looked at her, and although she was full of doubts, she also knew that now was not the time to ask. He stood up and followed Yi Jin out of the room, feeling a little premonition in his heart. This action might bring him closer to the truth or put him in danger. The night became deeper and deeper, and the two of them got on the car and drove towards the scrap factory around the city. Lin Xiaoran looked at the passing scenery outside the window, and his heartbeat was getting faster and faster. He didn't know what was going to happen next, but he knew that all of this could not be turned back. The car was rushing in the night, and the sound of the wheel friction between the tire and the ground was low and rapid, like the sound of Lin Xiaoran's heartbeat at this moment. He sat in the auxiliary driver's seat, clutching his hands tightly at the safety belt, his eyes staring straight at the darkness ahead. Yi Jin said nothing, and his fingers holding the direction plate turned slightly white due to force, and his expression on his face was solemn than at any time. The atmosphere in the car was so stressed that it made people breathless. Lin Xiao wanted to open his mouth several times to ask something, but looking at Yi Jin's unstoppable appearance, he swallowed it back. The scenery outside the window became increasingly deserted, and the high-rise building was slumped behind it, replaced by abandoned factories and broken streets. Lin Xiaoran confided that this place should be an industrial area around the city. There were no people coming in usually, and it was as silent as a ghost town at night. He felt a little nervous and couldn't help but ask, "Where are we going?" What is that cracker? Yi Jin glanced at him and said in a cold manner, the border crack is a place where the two worlds interact. It should have been closed, but now it is being opened. If it is not stopped, the rules of the two worlds will be in chaos. By then, it will not be just you, but everyone will be rolled in, and no one can escape it. Lin Xiaoran felt nervous and had a lot of questions in his brain, but he knew that now was not the time to pursue him. He gritted his teeth, forced himself to calm down, and his eyes fell back to the window. The car finally stopped in front of an old factory. The outer wall of the factory was covered with vines, and the iron door was covered with rocks, which looked like no one had entered or left for decades. Yi Jin turned off the fire and turned his head to look at him, with a rare stern look in his eyes. Speak, don't be disturbed after going in, don't be disturbed, listen to me. Understand? Lin Xiao suddenly pointed a little, but he was not attentive. He got off the car with Yi Jin, and the night wind blew over, bringing a biting chill, which made him tremble. Yi Jin took out a black backpack from the back box, which was equipped with some exquisite-looking equipment and a handgun. She put the gun on her waist, put her bag on her back, and signaled Lin Xiaoran to follow. The two of them walked through the iron door and stepped into the interior of the factory. The air was filled with a scent of iron and musty smell, and the sound of their feet reverberated in the empty space, which was particularly harsh. The factory was so dark that he couldn't see his fingers. Yi Jin took out a flashlight from his backpack to illuminate the road ahead. Where the beam swept, you can see broken mechanical parts and broken glass scattered on the ground, and some yellow papers piled up in the corners of the wall, which looked like they had been abandoned for a long time. Lin Xiaoran felt more and more uneasy, and he always felt that there was something unfavorable hidden in this place. He asked in a low voice, "The crack is here? It doesn't look special." Yi Jin didn't answer, but just accelerated his pace. The two of them walked through several abandoned cars and came to the deepest room in the factory. There is a huge metal device in the center of the room, like some old-fashioned electric generator, with a dusty surface, but the air around it is a little distorted, shaking like a heat wave. Lin Xiaoran stared at the device, and a strange fear suddenly surged in his heart, as if instinctively warning him not to get close. Yi Jin stopped walking, put down his backpack, and began to check the environment around the device. She took out a small instrument from her bag, swiped the air for a few times, and a bunch of jumping data was displayed on the screen. Her face became increasingly difficult to see, and she whispered a low voice, "Don't die, the cleft has been activated, and the energy fluctuations are stronger than I thought." Lin Xiaoran stood aside, completely unaware of what she was saying, so he could only ask, "What should I do? Can I close it?" Yi Jin shook her head, and a helpless look flashed in her eyes. "I can't close it, I can only try to stabilize it. But it takes time, and..." She turned on and looked at Lin Xiaoran. Her language became a little complicated. "And you need your help." "Me? What are you doing?" Lin Xiaoran was stunned, pointed at himself, and was puzzled. "I don't know anything, why are you asking me to fuck?" Yi Jin did not answer directly, but took out something like a hand ring from his backpack and sent it to him. "Wear this, it can connect your mind and the energy field of the crack. You are a substitute, with traces of two worlds on you, only you can help me locate the core of the crack." Lin Xiaoran looked at the hand ring, hesitated for a moment, and took it over and put it on. As soon as the hand ring touched the skin, it made a faint vibration. Then a strange feeling suddenly surged into his brain, as if someone was gently knocking on his mind, which was blurry and stinging. He raised his eyebrows and couldn't help asking, "Will this thing have any side effects?" Yi Jin said coldly, "Yes, but you don't have to choose now. If you want to survive, just bear it." Lin Xiaoran gritted his teeth and said nothing more. He closed his eyes and tried to feel the strange energy, and the memory fragments in his brain began to flash uncontrollably. Some are his own, some are Lin Xiaoran's. The two lives are like walking on horseback, making him unable to tell the difference between real and fake. He suddenly saw a picture. Lin Xiaoran stood in this factory, with the same device in front of him, his face full of hope and reluctance, and murmured, "I can't let them succeed. I absolutely cannot." Lin Xiaoran, concentrate. Yi Jin's voice suddenly interrupted his thoughts and pulled him back to reality. He opened his eyes quietly, covered in cold sweat, and gasped, saying, I saw Lin Xiaoran. He seemed to have been here and said something strange. Yi Jin's eyes changed and he chased and asked, what did he say? Lin Xiaoran slammed his head, but his brain was still terrible. I don't know very well, I seem to not want anyone to succeed. I can't remember it clearly. Yi Jin was silent for a while, and then pointed, okay, continue to feel and try to find the core position of the crack. I will protect you from the side. Lin Xiao had no choice but to continue with his head. He closed his eyes and tried to let the energy lead to his consciousness. Rather, he felt a wonderful pulling feeling, as if he was being dragged by something and moving in a certain direction. His consciousness became more and more blurred, and he could hear some low words in his ears, like many people saying at the same time, or like sounds from another world. At this moment, a harsh alarm sound suddenly erupted, and there was a red light on Yi Jin's instrument screen. She cursed in a low voice, someone is here. You should die, they are faster than I expected. Lin Xiao suddenly opened his eyes and his heart beat faster. Who is here? Is that helping me again? Yi Jin didn't answer, but just quickly pulled out his gun and looked around with a warning look. There was a sudden burst of stomping sound outside the factory, and then there were several low conversations, obviously more than one person. Lin Xiaoran's heart sank, and he guessed that this helper might have something to do with the guy who had beaten him before. He asked in a low voice, what should I do? Can we run? I can't run away. Yi Jin gritted his teeth, quickly stuffed the instrument back into his backpack, and then pulled Lin Xiaoran to hide behind a pile of waste irons. Don't make a sound, don't be disturbed, I'll deal with it. Lin Xiao suddenly pointed his head, held his breath, and shrank behind the waste iron and did not dare to move. As his footsteps grew closer, several black shadows appeared at the entrance of the room, holding weapons in his hands, and it was obvious that the person who came was not good. The head of the man with scarred face was the man who had been before. He sneered and looked around, with a low voice, Yi Jin, I know you are here, don't hide it. Hand over that substitute, otherwise this place will become your tomb. Yi Jin didn't respond, but just gave Lin Xiaoran a wink and signaled him not to move. She quietly adjusted her posture and was ready to counterattack at any time. Lin Xiaoran's heart beats like a drum, and his brain is full of miscellaneous thoughts. He suddenly realized that he might really die here, but he had not figured out the truth of all this and had not returned to his own world. At this moment, the scarred man seemed to have noticed something and walked towards the direction where they were hiding. The knife in his hand flashed coldly under the light. Lin Xiaoran felt nervous and almost shouted, but Yi Jin suddenly moved. She rushed out like a leopard, and several clean and neat actions directly knocked the scarred man to the ground. When several other people saw this, they immediately lifted their weapons, but Yi Jin reacted faster and opened several guns, forcing them to retreat. Go away! Yi Jin shouted at Lin Xiaoran, then rushed to another exit. Lin Xiaoran hurriedly followed, and the two walked through a narrow corridor, with a sound of guns and roars coming from behind, and it was obvious that the other party did not intend to let them go. They ran into another car, and Yi Jin quickly closed the iron door, held it with a stick, and temporarily stopped the pursuers. She gasped and turned to Lin Xiaoran, are you okay? Haven't you been hurt? Lin Xiaoran slammed his head and said with a thrust, it's okay, it's just that his legs are a little soft. What should we do now? They won't let us go. Yi Jin didn't say anything, just walked to the center of the car, his eyes falling on the huge metal device. At this moment, the air around the device was distorted even more harmful, and you could even see some small light floating in the air, slowly expanding like cracks. She gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, there is no time left. We must be stable now, otherwise everything will be done. Lin Xiaoran looked at the crack and felt a little nervous, but they will catch up with you any time. Can we calm down? It must be held back. Yi Jin's temperament was unquestionable. She quickly took out several small equipment from her backpack and started connecting the device. At the same time, she said to Lin Xiaoran, I need to accurately position the core of the crack by using my hand to feel the core of the crack, otherwise these equipment will not work. Lin Xiaoran hesitated for a moment, and still pointed his head. He closed his eyes and tried to reconnect the energy. This time, the pulling feeling in the consciousness became stronger, and he almost pulled his entire person in. He bit his teeth tightly, enduring the intense pain and the drama, and finally felt a clear direction. The core of the crack is in the center of the device, like an invisible vortex, constantly swallowing the surrounding energy. Finished. It's in the middle. He shouted with a heavy breath. When he opened his eyes, he found that Yi Jin had adjusted the equipment and started to start a certain program. The light spots around the device began to shrink, and the cracking speed seemed to slow down, but at the same time, a violent impact sound came from outside the iron door, which clearly showed that the other party had already caught up. Hold on, it's almost done. Yi Jin gritted his teeth and focused on operating the equipment. Lin Xiaoran stood aside, his palms were covered in sweat, and his eyes were fixed on the iron gate. The impact sound became more and more disturbing, the iron door began to deform, and the iron stick also made a squeaking sound that was overwhelming. He was desperate in his heart and couldn't help asking, if they came in, would we be done? Yi Jin didn't answer, but just accelerated his movements. Just as the iron door was about to be knocked open, the device suddenly released a low bird, and then the distortion around the crack completely disappeared, and the air returned to a calm state. Yi Jin let out a breath and wiped the sweat from the head. It's done, the crack is stable. But the sound just fell, and the iron door was finally knocked open. The scarred man came in with several people, his face full of anger. Yi Jin, do you think this is over? Hand over the substitute, otherwise you don't want to live either. Yi Jin sneered, stood up, and slapped in front of Lin Xiaoran. If you want to move him, please leave me alone first. Lin Xiaoran looked at her back and suddenly felt an indescribable emotion in her heart. He knew that Yi Jin might not be completely credible, but at least for this moment, she was really protecting him. He gritted his teeth, stood beside her, and said in a low voice, I'm not completely useless, let's sweep them together. Yi Jin glanced at him and a smile came out of the corner of his mouth. Okay, I didn't expect you to be a little bit angry. The other party stopped talking and rushed over. Yi Jin and Lin Xiaoran were back to back, and they were reluctant to attack. Although Lin Xiaoran had no experience in fighting, he was still young and powerful. He lifted up the iron sticks on the ground and danced around, barely holding on to several attacks. Yi Jin was like a battle machine, and his movements were clean and neat, knocking down 2 of them in a few seconds. But there were too many people on the other side, and they gradually lost their temper. The scarred man grabbed a gap and suddenly snatched Lin Xiaoran, pointing the knife in his hand straight into his chest. Lin Xiaoran's heart slammed, instinctively closed his eyes, but the expected pain did not come, and only a sound of humming could be heard in his ears. He opened his eyes quietly and found that Yi Jin was pressing in front of him, with a hole in his shoulder, and blood flowing down his arms. She gritted her teeth and turned to him. Don't be stunned, run. Go to the device and start the final protection procedure. Lin Xiaoran was stunned for a moment, then he quickly rushed towards the device. The scarred man saw him and roared and wanted to chase him, but Yi Jin held him tightly and gave Lin Xiaoran time. He ran to the device, pressed several buttons according to Yi Jin's previous instructions, and the device released a low bird again. Then an invisible light curtain rose from the surroundings of the device, separating him from the device. Outside the light curtain, the fight between Yi Jin and the scarred man became more and more intense. Lin Xiaoran felt anxious, but he knew that he could not help, so he could only pray that she could hold him back. At this moment, the air inside the light curtain suddenly began to distort again, and a blurred figure appeared in front of him. Lin Xiaoran was shocked. When he looked closely, he found that the facial features of the figure were exactly the same as his, but his temperament was completely different, and his eyes were filled with slander and fatigue. It's Lin Xiaoran. He was stunned and couldn't help asking, Are you Lin Xiaoran? Are you dead? Lin Xiaoran looked at him and smiled bitterly. I'm really dead, but my consciousness remains in the crack. I've been waiting for you to come. His voice was low and weak, as if it would disappear at any time. Lin Xiaoran had a lot of questions in his brain, but time didn't wait for anyone, so he could only choose the most important question: what's going on with all this? Why choose me as a substitute? Lin Xiaoran was silent for a while, and then said, the substitute method is not a natural rule, but a man created it for. Someone wants to use the crack to break the balance of the two worlds and gain unlimited energy. And I discovered this trait and tried to stop them, but I failed. They killed me, but my consciousness was trapped in the crack and could not leave. Until you come, you are the only one who can accomplish what I have not finished. Then what should I do? Lin Xiao asked anxiously, his heart beating faster and faster. Lin Xiaoran pointed to the center of the device: destroy the core of the crack and close the passage of the two worlds. Only in this way can their plan fail. But the price is, you may never go back to your own world. Lin Xiaoran was stunned, and he felt like something was hit hard in his heart. Can't go back to your own world? That means he will stay here forever and live as Lin Xiaoran forever. His brain flashed with family and friends in the real world, and Chen Yang's always smiling face, and his heart felt sore. But he also knew that if he didn't do this, it would be not just him, but people in both worlds would be in danger. He gritted his teeth and finally made up his mind, okay, I'll do it. Lin Xiaoran looked at him, with a little more relief in his eyes. Thank you, to live for me, and for yourself. After speaking, his figure began to become transparent and then disappeared into the air. Lin Xiaoran took a deep breath, walked to the center of the device, and followed Lin Xiaoran's guidance and found a hidden button. He hesitated for a second, then pressed hard. The device emitted a violent shock, and then the entire space began to collapse, and the scene outside the light curtain became blurred. He saw Yi Jin look at him here, with a complex emotion in his eyes, and was swallowed by the collapsed energy waves. The core of the crack begins to shrink, and a huge energy spike is released, tearing everything apart. Lin Xiao suddenly closed his eyes, and the last thought in his brain was, I hope Qinyang can do well, and I hope I can remember who I am. When everything calmed down, the factory no longer existed, and there was a vast ruin around it. Lin Xiao was lying on the ground, his eyes vaguely opened, and he realized that he was still alive. He sat up quietly, looked down at his hands, still those familiar and unfamiliar hands. He knew that from this moment on, he was no longer Lin Xiaoran, nor was he completely Lin Xiaoran, but a new existence after the fusion of the two. Far away, the morning light rose slowly, illuminating this deserted land. He stood up, patted the dust on his body, and walked away. A new life is about to begin, and he will continue to move forward with the memories of the two worlds.